Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the last series of Fly Tying Guild classes for this winter. And I want to thank you all for being here. This is so great. No matter how many people come, from wherever you come from, we're glad and we want to keep producing these classes and have them free to everybody. There's no charge, but we would like you, if you so want to, you can join our guild and help us out financially a little bit just by joining. So anyway, I'm going to turn the meeting over to John Kraft, and he's going to be your host, and he has been here several times and helped to start the guild in the first place. So John, I'm going to go ahead and spotlight you, and you take it
Good.
away.
Okay, thanks. Well, hello everyone. I volunteered to tie flies for the guild several months ago, and I had no idea what I was going to tie. And a lot of you know that my wife and I just returned from Argentina and Chile, and we had a great time down there. You know, it's summer, and I'm looking outside here. We still have big patches of snow. I got out to the river yesterday, tried to through some snow. And I got to say, I kind of like summer fishing a lot better than winter fishing. Uh, so as I went through my repertoire of flies to tie, I said, you know what? I'm going to teach two flies that we had great success with in Argentina the last week that we fished. And we fished a lot of hopper droppers, and the dry fly is the Royal PMX. They use that a lot down there. I tied several, and if you follow me, you'll notice that I had a real problem tying these flies, and they kind of got the best of me. And I wrote a blog about them. I had legs going every which way, and who knows what's going to happen tonight. I am not an expert at this fly. And the I will show the Perdigon that I wanted to start with. This is just a very simple Perdigon fly pattern that uh, that they use down in Argentina. Now, I happen to use one that's I don't think I pulled one out. No, I happen to use one that was a pheasant tail Perdigon that uses some Vivus body quill instead of the real pheasant tail. And I've got to tell you that that's my number one watched YouTube video. I've got, I don't know, 75 or 80 YouTube videos on fly tying, and that one is really popular. And I gave it to the guides down there. We never put it on. They didn't seem to want to try it. But this is very similar to it. So I thought that if that I would start with this one and kind of warm up a little bit. I've been back about let's see, 2 weeks tomorrow, and spent a lot of time on my blog, on my pictures, shoveling snow, doing a lot of other things, and not tying flies. And so it'll be interesting how things go tonight. So I know a lot of you who do the demo fly tying, something happens usually, and uh, who knows what that's going to be tonight for me. But so I put a hook in the vise. I happen to be using some Foley mill. Um, let's get it in focus here. And these are size 16. And I have a bead. And you notice how I put the beads on. That works best for me. I have just a bead. Had this for many years. That's how I apply them. And I'm using some Danville thread, some brown. And I'll start the thread on the hook right behind the bead. And I try to wedge the bead up against the eye of the hook in order to keep it out of the way for me. Use my thumb and forefinger. And it's almost there. And I'll tell you a story as I wrap the brown thread, because that's it takes a lot of thread. I'm using a Coq de Leon. I get this from the saddle. I just pulled one of these feathers off, and I just opened this up a little bit. And I will just select some here, move those out of the way. Pull the barbules away from the rachis so that the ends are all aligned. Take your thumb and forefinger, hold them, and then pull the feather away. And those tips will continue to be aligned. I'm going to measure. Just place a soft wrap and pull upward. That will get the barbules on top of the hook. And I'll just continue to hold them up a little bit. That'll keep them on the top of the hook. And I'll just go down to where I'm about ready to go around the bend of the hook, and then come back up. And the body of this fly is all thread. So if you think I'm making a lot of extra wraps, you're right, because that's what I need to fill the taper of the fly. For the tag end, I'm just using some Vivus. It's kind of a copper color. I've already pulled some off, and what I find useful for me is to use my hackle pliers and put my materials on there, and then it's very easy for me to grab. I will tie this on. This is about where I want my tag to end. And so I will start there and wrap backwards. And then forward. And tie off the tag end. And I'll flatten my thread and just use touching turns as I continue up. Oh, I needed one more thing. Just remembered I needed the flash, but I'll tie that on in just a moment after I put some thread wraps. So I'm just going to go back and forth and create a taper. And while I do that, I'll tell you that I went out fishing yesterday and I used some Perdigons. And I was lucky enough, and I ended up landing, I fished on the Metolius, and I ended up, first one was a little brown trout, and then a rainbow, and a couple of whitefish. So I know that Perdigons work. I just choose not to nymph fish that much anymore. And I think as we age with our fly fishing, we choose what we enjoy. And I used to fish a lot of different ways, and nymph fishing was one of those, but I've just gone away from that a lot. But then I go to South America and I want to catch fish, and not all the time do dry flies work down there. So that's why they put on a dry dropper, and that's what this one did. So what I needed was some mirage tinsel, and I'm just going to tie this in on top. I just put a soft wrap, couple of them, make sure it's on top, and rather than cutting that, I'll just pull it down and make touching turns. And we'll make a little more of a bump in here. And then pull it forward. I like to place tie down wraps and then one in front. So if I bump it, there's at least one protection of wrap that I don't loosen up. I would normally put this on another hackle plier if I'm tying a bunch of these. But it's the only one I'm tying tonight, so I'm just throwing it away. And now I just get my whip finisher and we'll whip finish that. In the last step, I'm going to use some UV resin to coat the fly. My first step, and I don't know that this is necessary, but I happen to use, I want to fill this hole a little bit. So I'm just going to put a dab in here. That's where the slot is. And then the last step I do is use some bone dry, and this has a brush to it that I have cut off a lot of it. Always put the lid back on so you don't dump it all over your tying desk. And then we'll set this. Don't want to get it too hot. Wait just briefly and do one last time. So I got to tell you, this fly caught a lot of fish. And we were catching fish from, well, actually, probably from 9 to 23 inches. And this is the other one. So it's just a black and red version. And it uses a silver bead instead of the copper one. So I can tell you that those are successful and they're quick and easy to tie. One other thing I wanted to share was I know several of us have had conversations over the years about how there is no consistency in manufacturers on fly hooks. And I will show you. Let me take this out. I have another one of those fully mill hooks that I'll put into the vise. I'm not going to put a bead on it because I just want to show you the difference. This is a Montana Fly Company. You can tell it's a little bit different. The shank is shorter than the full-in mills. And I had one, I guess I didn't pull it out, from Daiichi, and those are about twice as long of a hook shank, which if you're a fly tyer and you're trying to be consistent in your tying, it just drives me crazy. And I know that a lot of other you. So here's one. Let me pull this out. So this is a 46-47. Again, it's size 16. And look at the difference. So those are three different size 16s, all a little bit different. The one thing, and I don't fish a lot of Perdigons, so I'm not an expert at this at all. But the one thing that concerns me a lot of the time is once you put the bead on, how much of a gap there is between the bead and the hook point, and whether the fish can really get hooked. So maybe some other people on here tonight have opinions on that, and they've experimented over the years with different ones. But if you look at that, let me take this one out. I'll put that Daiichi back in. And hold the finished fly up again. So look at the amount of gap that would be between that Daiichi.
That's a difference of one hook size, John.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
They're all size 16s.
Well,
So if you're a tyer, you could certainly tie them shorter so that you don't have to tie it all the way back to where the bend of the hook is. But it's just well, Al, since you're the one that came up or spoke up, I know that we've talked about this, how it drives us crazy on different hook manufacturers. There's not common um, a common standard for hooks. But anyway, that was just an opportunity to vent a little bit, I guess. But any questions or comments about this Perdigon?
so which one do you prefer, John? Uh,
Um, I like the the fulling mill, the hook I used tonight.
mhm.
I used that a lot, and I think that there's enough distance between here to hook fish, and I did yesterday with it. So I know that it works, but at times I'm just um, I don't understand how a fish can actually get hooked on some of those.
Well, so what's the distance? Uh, like if you're tying, what do you want? What's the distance you should try to keep?
Oh, I don't know. I just
Do you
eyeball
have
it,
any?
Sherry.
Okay.
I just some of them actually this one is a little bit shorter, I think. This is the Montana Fly Company.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, maybe it's
Oh, that would be
maybe that's
really short distance,
yeah.
but the gape looks bigger
So that's a
yeah.
size 16 for the Montana Fly Company. Oops, I got hooks falling all over the place. One moment here. But I use size 14 a lot from Montana Fly Company. And let me pull one of those out for you. So that one just has a longer
Oh,
shank, and when it's got the bead on it, it seems to work okay.
yeah, it looks like it's bigger. It's a
But I
16,
just
but a bigger
caution,
gape.
well, it's a size 14. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
So I just caution you when you go to the fly shop, and if you're new to tying Perdigons, just look at the fly and envision a bead on it that may or may not impact the hooking power of that particular hook.
Any other questions?
A mic trick here. I was introduced last year to these offset bores of beads instead of the slotted beads. And with
Oh,
those, you could kind of tie them so that the bead is up and out of the gap.
good idea. I've never tried those. Okay, no other questions?
I don't see
Let
anything
me,
in the chat.
okay, let me move this out of the way.
I see Kathleen's here. Hi, Kathleen. And Valerie. Glad you could make it.
Okay, this is my nemesis fly. And I'll tell you, I got no guarantees tonight how this is going to turn out.
It looks like a lot of parts.
It is a lot of parts, and they all get in the way. So, as I said earlier, I'm not an expert on this fly, and you'll notice that some of the legs are askew anyway. So when I started tying this fly, I tied a lot of flies to take down to Argentina with us. And I knew from experience that this is a fish catching fly. So I go, I'm going to tie up.
Did we lose you, John?
Um,
We
but
had some audio there.
one of them I had was, can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, uh-huh.
Okay. So one time I had the legs sticking backwards because I forgot about them. Another one, this leg was sticking almost straight up. I tried to move them on one side and I pulled the leg completely out. And as I said on one of my weekly posts, I just poked fun at myself and shared pictures of all the bad flies that I tied. And I had one comment, and I truly believe it, that the fish probably don't care, but as a fly tyer, I do. So I try to make them consistent. I wouldn't say perfect because they're all tough to, it's really tough to tie perfect flies. But we're going to try to tie one tonight and see what happens. I remember the first time I did a Zoom session, I think I broke my thread 2 or 3 times, and so you go, well, what's going on here? But we'll see what happens. First thing I do before I tie flies is to debarb the hook. We'll put it in the vise. In the tie-in directions that I sent out, I think I said I used black thread, but I use this a lot. This is just some Danville 6/0 and olive done, and I just like it. It blends in with the peacock, which is one of the reasons why I like it so much. I just start on the hook behind the eye, and I will be using some poly. So this is the escaped me. Al, help me out here. What's the name of this poly?
It's called Fintex.
Fantex, thank you. I've been using this skein for a few years now. And you can't see it very well, but
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
there's a lot left here. And what I like to do is put in my post first. A lot of people will do the tie in the tail and do the post later, but this is how I tie them. I think I thought about this the other day. I believe the reason I do this is because I've tied so many sparkle dens over the years. And when I tie sparkle dens, I start with the wing and then do the tail second. And so I've just consistently done that. I'm using some elk, some cow elk. So I just pulled some out. I'm going to get rid of all of this debris over my trash bin. I hold it up to the light, see if I have all the debris out. We're going to stack it. I twist the hair stacker and use my thumb and forefinger to pull it out. And for the measurement, a lot of times you use the length of the shank of the hook. These are really short, and it's probably half or less. So I measure that, and then I'm just going to cut a little bit of an angle here. This will then take a couple of soft wraps. That's about right. I'll hold upright on the elk, and as I come down, I'm going to loosen my tension. This is the end, and then I'll come back and tighten it down. You notice I use um, my forefinger to guide the thread and finish tying off the butt ends of the elk. I'll pull out some peacock, and I use, this is a size 10. Did I say that? I'm sorry. I'm using a 1710. In my instructions, I said a 1280. That's a dry fly hook. And this is a nymph hook, which is stronger for big fish. And how big a fish can you catch this? Well, I got to tell you, my last fish in Argentina was on this fly, and it was 24 inches on a dry fly. I got
Wow.
that. I said, I'm done.
That's a big fish.
That is a big fish. So I'll take these ends and kind of align them somewhat. They don't have to be perfect, because what I want is the hurl down here. It's a little bit thicker than what it is at the tip. So I'm just going to cut this off. And then as I tie this in, I'm going to tie it in on the bottom. And you notice that I positioned it here, so I don't need to come back and trim. I'm trying to manage the diameter of the body so it's fairly consistent. And I will just take a half hitch and tie that off. Because my next step is to use some Unifloss in red, single strand. And I put it on my bobbin holder. And I will wind back to my tie off point. Now I'm ready to tie my hurl in, and I'll just twist it. And watch out for that point because it will break those fibers. And I'll tie it off on the bottom and use touching turns. So I go forward. That will create my segment. And I'll go back and then forward again, just to make sure I've got all of that covered. And I'm moving my peacock out of the way because I want to tie this off. I'm reattaching my thread. And make the last band here. That's 3 wraps to tie it off. I'll make 1 wrap in front just for the reason. So if I bump my bobbin holder, I found that I don't have as much problem with losing that. So far, so good.
Yeah, beautiful.
That's the easy part. I'll use some more elk again for the wing. Well, I'll tell you, when I first started tying this, there's a lot of material that goes on this fly, it seems like. And it's a lot more than what I normally use, or a lot of different types of material. Again, I'm trying to just get out all the fuzzies here. I'll stack it. So one of the things, or two points right here. You notice that I haven't posted my, or I haven't done anything to get that post to stand up, and that's because I want it out of the way so I can tie in my elk wing. So I found that when I first started tying these, I I posted this properly so it was just sticking straight up, and then I would try to put my elk in, and it was just everything was in the way, and I had problems with it. The other thing is that the amount of elk I use, this might be a little bit sparse, but I found that if you use too much elk, then what will happen is as you tie it down, the elk will spin around the hook, which is not a good thing. And that's a sign if you're using too much, or the diameter of each elk fiber is too much. So this is cow. If you use bull, the fibers are thicker. I would rather use yearling elk, but I don't have any yearling elk that's the darker color like this. So those are the trade-offs you have. So I'm going to measure this and then cut it, pre-cut it before I tie it in. So I'll use my thumbnail. Let me see if I can get over here to this angle. I'll use my thumbnail to say this is where I want to cut it. And then I flatten my thread by spinning it. So when I bring it up, I'll have a loose wrap. But you notice that as I push this down, I'm trying to spread the elk fibers around the hook a little bit. So I'll take a couple of loose wraps and tighten. And I'll just look for measurement. That's good. So the other thing I highlighted earlier was trying to have a consistent diameter of the body. And that really helps on this step. If you have too much of a taper here and you try to tie an elk wing in, a lot of times your thread will slip off the elk because it's a lot slicker than what deer hair is. And so this technique works for me. The other thing I will do, I want it to around the hook a little bit, so I'll just take my thumbnail and push a little, and that spread it out. And now I'll tighten it and go forward and then back. And then as I come back the last few turns, I don't put as much pressure on. Elk hair doesn't usually flare, but if it has a tendency to flare, this is where it will do that. And adding additional tight wraps right at the back end here will cause that to flare. We'll see if that'll impact. That doesn't look like it. Okay. So far so good. So I've got the remaining items to tie on are the hackle, the legs, and some more peacock. And all of that has to fit within here. What could possibly go wrong? So I'll get this piece of poly out. I'm going to tie in, let's see, what am I going to do? I'm going to post this first. So I'll go ahead and make some wraps in front of the poly wing. What I used to do is go up like this. But what I found is if I put this close to me or directly at me, I can see it better. And if you're tying a lot, your arm isn't up. Your arm isn't up. You can't see that, sorry. And it's a lot more comfortable. So that's why I do it. Oh, the other step I have, I forgot. Here's a piece of lead wire. Why do I have that? To keep the hair out of the way. Now that's one of the problems with this fly is you've got so much going on that different materials get in the way. So now it's much easier for me to post the wing. Pull. And now I move it so it's upright and go down. I'm using the technique that Al uses for the rebar, adding some strength to this post. And I'm adding thread just because I want, my experience is I don't want a huge drop off between the front and the back here. Still, so far so good. Now I'm going to put my hackle on. I've got a bare section. I like to tie it in with the shiny side towards me. And I will go up the post. And back down. The reason I like to tie the shiny side towards me is that when I come down, you can see a little bit of the cupping of this feather. So the hackles, or excuse me, the barbules come up. And I don't want that to interfere as I'm tying. So I keep that out of the way. Okay. Now let's put some peacock on. There's 3, 4, let's go with 5. Get these close again, and then I'll just trim them. And I'm going to use a soft wrap, tie it on the bottom. And then that's out of the way for my legs, which happen to be, whoops, some Life Flex in brown. And this is an interesting material. It's just really rubbery. So I'll cut it in half. Go to the other camera. And I will put it over the top, kind of even it out, and then use my thread to place it where I want it. I'll do that for the other side. And leave my thread behind the eye. Okay. Now let's see how I do with my legs. So this is where you're going to have, where I had problems. Maybe you won't. Sometimes you can place a thread wrap behind the legs. That will force them to stick out. That doesn't look so good. So I will continue to wrap so my goal is to have a nice peacock underbody. And I always look back and see where my legs are so I don't impact them too much. And then I will pull the leg up. And here's where you get into problems if you forget about it. You notice how this is starting to stick up. So the peacock what you find is the peacock starts to move your leg around. And that was my nemesis by tying a dozen or so of these. And then I'll tie that off towards the, oops, on the bottom. So see how I impacted the leg?
Yeah.
What could possibly go wrong, right?
So it's easy to move them in the wrong direction when you wrap the peacock.
It is
That's
because
where it's usually.
yeah, the peacock puts pressure on it. And we'll try to cut that off um, without cutting your legs off.
Yeah, right. Ah,
Now I want my thread behind the post. So I'm just going to make a couple of wraps, which is why I use this color thread, because you really can't see that wrap. Now, the last thing we need to do is just wrap or just do a normal parachute. And you can also grab your legs here, but hopefully not. So we will start going down.
it looks like a floater.
And I don't like that leg anyway, but hey, it is what it is at this point. So you notice why I had that lead around the elk, because I wouldn't be able to tie this otherwise. And that's a tip I learned from Charlie Craven, I think it was. Okay, now we're going to tie off around the post. And this is another spot where you can grab those legs and put it up here. And then I'll pull everything back and bring it forward, and we'll tie it off around that, just in front of the eye. Now, if you're a custom fly tyer like me, you would not make any money at all tying this
On
fly.
this one, no way. Too complicated. $5 a fly.
And even then, I wouldn't be getting minimum wage.
Yeah, really.
So I'll take my scissors and just push and pull at the same time. That takes the hackle out. I will remove the lead wire. We'll trim the post to length, however you like it. We'll trim the legs a little bit. And I've got one leg sticking up. So that's my nemesis fly that I thought I would use this as a personal challenge to be able to hopefully teach a little bit. But that's this is a great fly.
Okay.
I'm going to be tying some and using it as a in a tractor pattern in my upcoming summer, just because it works so well. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that people have.
So what's your
Yeah.
speed? In other words, if you get cranking on this
Hey,
fly, how long would it take you to tie each one?
You know what? I haven't even gotten to that point, Sherry.
Oh, okay. I think we got another
Yeah.
question here somewhere.
Yeah.
yeah, Mike Tripp here. Hey, John,
Hi, Mike.
how big do you tie this?
Good question. So I'm tying it in size 8 to 12.
So I was lucky enough to fish the Lemay River out of Barrilocas in Argentina 4 years ago in the spring, and the guide insisted on using a similar pattern for the dry, and the Browns loved it. I think it was like a size 8 big.
Yeah.
And I
Yep.
shouldn't share this. You know, we're supposed to keep secrets, but last summer in July on Diamond Lake, the fish were coming up on my indicator, and I took out my Argentina big hopper similar to this, and the Browns loved it.
Perfect.
Yeah. And the other question is, a friend of mine in Eugene liked to use red silk instead of floss. And he pointed out and showed me that in the water, that's a hotter body
Oh,
than the red floss. What do you think about that?
um, it could very well be. My point is I use this because it's easier.
Okay. Yeah, the red silk
So
is
I
hotter,
use
but
it, yeah, I use it on a bobbin holder, and so it's just easier for me to use. Uh, you're right though that silk might end up being brighter. The other thing you could do is put down a base of white thread. Start tying with white thread so that it just would pop more. And
yeah,
actually with this Unifloss, it might do better as well. I'll
my
tell you that
first,
in my experience, the fish didn't seem to matter.
okay. In my first fly tying class in Eugene in the 90s, it was from Stan Walters, who was the Busek Award winner.
Yep.
This thing came about thread, and I said, "Look, guys, I don't care what color thread you use as long as it's olive."
Yeah. I've used more and more olive thread. It seems to
Yeah.
disappear with a lot of my flies. So I challenge people to try this. Um, tell me what happens when you get to the leg part, because that's been my nemesis. And I normally come across as I'm a better fly tyer than this, but like I said, this is what I've been trying to uh, uh, do. So I plan on tying a lot of these so I can try to get better at them.
Right, my trip again. Could you say again what you use for the rubber legs?
Yeah,
What brand?
it's Life Flex, but anything will work.
Yeah, I've gone around on legs. Some are too heavy, and then the silicon based ones are nice in a way, but they're not very durable.
Yeah, these are super durable. They've got some stretch to them too. So I've had
Yeah,
really good
good,
success with those. And they obviously come in a lot of different colors.
great, thank you.
Mhm.
Any more questions? You're gonna fish it like a regular old dry fly. Let it
You got
drift.
it. You
Okay.
got it.
Yeah.
Just put it out there and probably won't start with a dropper just because I like to fish dries.
Mm.
The brown
But
trout on Diamond Lake loved it.
well, like I was just going to highlight your comment again that a lot of times when you're fishing a dry dropper and you're expecting them to take the dropper, the fish come up and take the dry. And another quick story, and when we were fishing in Chile this year, we were on a lake and brown trout fishing, Mike. So browns and rainbows. And we started with this fly and put a dropper on because the guide said, "Oh, we'll probably catch them on droppers." And the first fish took the dry. And we looked at him and he goes, "Okay, we'll cut them off. We'll just fish dry flies." And we fished dry flies the rest of the day and caught fish. The fish will tell you.
Yeah, they're hungry. They'll eat that.
So I got to tell you, the one of the best materials in your fly tying is peacock. So just any fly that's got peacock on it is going to be a fish catcher.
Good. Any other questions or comments, or we're
You
going to
know,
call it a night? Yeah,
well, I have another question about peacock, and
sure.
it's really tricky to get the peacock you like, and it's different when we look at it in light, and I'm told the color is from refraction. Have people done studies on what it looks like through the water as opposed to in air?
I don't know.
I've never seen that,
Yeah.
so I've wondered about that because I fuss about my peacock, and I keep thinking, well, what's it look like after it's wet? 'Cause I'm looking at it in air, but the fish do love it. So,
Well, I I don't know how to answer your question, but my thought is that with all of the natural colors in it, and it's multiple colors, it appears green, but there's multiple colors to it. So it's got to um, shine somewhat. I've got my UV light here. It does reflect a little bit, so I don't, perhaps
Can you
there's
hold
a
it up?
UV
Oh,
property.
hold it up a little bit so we can see it.
Yeah, 1 second here. Let's do this. Whoop. Got too many buttons to push.
Yeah.
Let me get in my dark room here.
Oh, there you go.
It shines a little bit. It isn't quite as reflective as other UV properties, but it does
I
have a
think
little
it's,
bit
I think
of
there's lots of
shine.
different colors.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, there's some,
I,
well, it's reflecting the UV, so maybe the UV light actually emanates purple. I don't know.
yeah, and what does the bronzed peacock look like under that light? Have you tried that?
No, I haven't.
I'm biased towards bronzed peacock, but it's hard to get it.
Yeah.
Lay your peacock out in the sunlight
Okay.
and it will turn it a little bronzier.
mhm.